Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. So before we jump in, if you enjoy this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready. And we're going to start with some great news out of Illinois that we got the cannabis sales figures for the month of October, and as we see, sales remain strong. They're not declining or slowing down in any sort of way, despite some claims from investment firms. So as we can see in October, they sold not a record because July still holds the record, but selling roughly 500,000 more items than they did the month before, with in-state resident sales decreasing a little bit to 81.2 million and out-of-state resident sales increasing from 40 million to 42.1 million for another strong month of 123.3 million in sales. So when we compare that to last October, 75.2 million, this is obviously a big jump from there, but it's also worth noting Illinois has been handing out licenses in the last few months, so once those license owners can set up shop and get that going, this should help increase the sales. So great job out of Illinois. While Philadelphia voters approved cannabis referendum calling for statewide legalization. So this was reported last night by Marijuana Moment, but I wanted to add it in as Philadelphia voters are sending a clear message to lawmakers, strongly approving a referendum on cannabis legalization, as a growing number of state senators and representatives are stepping up their push to get the reform enacted across Pennsylvania. The measure adds a section to the city's charter that says the citizens of Pennsylvania call upon the Pennsylvania General Assembly and the governor to pass legislation that will decriminalize, regulate, and tax the use and sale to adults aged 21 and older of cannabis for non-medical purposes. Preliminary results on Tuesday evening showed the proposal leading by a 73% to 27% margin. 96% of electoral divisions in the city reporting. So citizens of Philadelphia have spoken. Love to see that. While senators file a cannabis amendment to the NDAA defense bill that would streamline cannabis research. And although this is a great effort, people are seeing through it, and the best thing the Dems could do is just really start the descheduling process already, as a pair of senators have filed a cannabis amendment that they hope to attach to large-scale defense spending legislation, but it's not the cannabis banking reform proposal that industry stakeholders have been waiting for. Instead, this one deals with removing barriers to research on cannabis effects. Again, something you could change if you just descheduled the plant. Dianne Feinstein and Brian Schatz submitted an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act on Monday that would streamline the application process for researchers who want to investigate cannabis as well as manufacture the plant to be used in studies. The proposal would also clarify that physicians are allowed to discuss the risks and benefits of cannabis with patients and require the U.S. Department of Health and Services to submit a report on those potential health benefits as well as on the barriers to cannabis research and how to overcome those obstacles. We already know this, and yes, educating doctors on this cannabis plant would be the best thing to help reduce opioid deaths as well. Dozens of amendments have filed for NDAA so far, and industry stakeholders are eager to see if the Senate follows the lead of the House and inserts language that's meant to protect banks that service state legal cannabis businesses. So this has been inserted in the Senate version of the NDAA. Mind you, the SAFE is still in the House version from our latest sources. For now, the research amendment is the only cannabis-related measure that's been submitted, but it's not yet clear when the overall bill will come to the Senate floor. If no senator files a banking amendment, the issue's fate will be decided by a bicameral conference committee charged with reconciling the differences between the two chambers' versions of the bill before sending a final proposal to the president. So no point speculating any further here. We're just going to have to wait until November carries forward. But this one comes out of NewJersey.com. Minority cannabis owners say federal banking bill should pass even without social justice provisions. So it's those that are actually trying to become entrepreneurs and start their own cannabis businesses that are really feeling the brunt of this, and they're starting to speak up. So to get banking services for her cannabis delivery business, Precious Osei-Geresi, Chief Operating Officer of Roll Up Life in East Orange, says she has to drive 2 hours to the only financial institution that will help her. It's because most federally regulated banks don't want anything to do with the budding cannabis industry, which, while legal in New Jersey and other states, remain illegal under federal law. Imagine if I can go to my local bank and just do regular transactions. Osei-Geresi said Thursday on a Zoom conference call held by the U.S. Cannabis Council. We just need to start. And their voices are echoing, so at some point Congress is going to have to listen, as Osei-Geresi was one of the several minority cannabis business owners urging Congress to pass the Safe Banking Act, which would let banks offer credit cards, checking accounts, and other financial services to legal cannabis businesses in legal states. While Rep. Ed Perlmutter of Colorado, the banking bill's chief sponsor, urged the bank provisions be included in the final defense bill because it would help safeguard the financial system, reduce the public safety risk in our communities, and help support veteran and minority-owned businesses now, which is 100% true. But there's one person standing in the way, and that is the representative of New Jersey, which is Cory Booker. Though he is leading the fight in the chamber to end the federal ban on cannabis, Booker insists that it be done in combination with social justice provisions to help the individuals and communities ravaged by the war on drugs. Yeah, he says that. I support safe banking, but that takes the pressure off of doing the restorative justice provisions, Booker told NJ Cannabis Insider. And he backed that up by asking the Attorney General Merrick Garland to start the descheduling process and respond by October 20th. He didn't respond whatsoever. So that seemed like lip service. But then I found this from Sabatino, who's an MSO investor as well and puts a lot of his research on Twitter. So thank you for sharing this. Just realized NJ is known as the medicine chest of the world. This explains a lot. No wonder some are willing to lay themselves down in front of any kind of banking reform. So who's lining Booker's pockets? So this article is here if you want to check it out. But obviously doing some digging, you're going to find, and I just found this was really interesting. This was from September 9th. Sabatino shared this. It's worth watching, but I'm not going to play it because this video's got a lot of stuff to get through. But finding out New Jersey is home to over 3,000 pharmaceutical medical companies. They're lining Booker's coffers to slow this process down in the name of social equity. You just got to follow the money. And so this was obviously something I didn't know before, but finding this out is like, okay, this makes sense why it's taking much longer. Who's in power in New Jersey? Cory Booker. New Jersey is respected globally for its strength in the biopharmaceutical and medical device industry, thus the name the medicine chest of the world. The state is home to 14 of the world's largest 20 pharmaceutical companies, which is wild. So then I went to opensecrets.org. Everything you need to know about where Cory Booker gets his money. Now, in here, it's not one of his biggest contributors, so that's fair to say. However, we can take a look. An issue that may arise in the 2020 Democratic primary is the close relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and Booker. New Jersey hosts the headquarters of many major pharmaceutical companies, as they long have had good relations with the New Jersey delegations. Booker said in 2017 that he would put a pause on accepting money from the industry. Has that pause resumed? We don't know, but I just wanted to share this. This was after he received heavy progressive criticism for helping kill a bill sponsored by Sanders to lower drug prices. Interesting. So Booker killed a bill to lower the drug prices. So we know whose side he's on. 2016, pharmaceutical PACs gave $57,500 to Booker. Becton Dixon and Co., Bristol Myers Squibb, and Sanofi PACs all contributed $5,000 each in 2016. Before that, in 2014, the cycle he was actually running in, Booker's campaign took in $161,000 in pharmaceutical PAC money. Pfizer contributed $17,500. Merck & Co. gave $12,500, and several more gave $10,000 each. Now, obviously, we need to get lobbying out of politics. Otherwise, corporations just run the government. However, just got to point out that, like Booker, you're willing to delay and give the middle finger to your constituents and all Americans for pennies? You suck, man. So anyways, if you guys wanted to learn more, you can find these links below, but that's where they're getting their money from. And so just to relay everything that we've gone through, 6 takeaways from the U.S. Cannabis Council's Unsafe Banking Briefing. And this is what these entrepreneurs are actually dealing with. 1, the lack of banking access harms smaller and minority-owned businesses, as Precious shared her story in NewJersey.com. Cannabis businesses were declared essential during coronavirus-related shutdowns, but were not offered the same financial aid as others essential businesses, and this comes from Leo Bridgewater, founder of Bridge H2O. So thank you for sharing that concern, because that is legitimate. All cash businesses are a public safety risk. This is from James Bauer. Yes, that is quite clear, especially as more people keep dying because these are targets for armed robbery. Logistical issues abound. Alfonso Tucky Blunt, CEO of Blunts and More. Lack of financial support is often the biggest barrier to entry for cannabis entrepreneurs because they can't get loans, especially without safe banking. And this one is from Seyun Adedeji, CEO of Elevate. And Safe Banking Act is a step forward in this industry. Steve Hawkins, CEO of U.S. Cannabis Council. Now, we already know this. These are, again, all truths that entrepreneurs are facing, but basically what Cory Booker is doing is just giving the MSOs a free ride, especially because no weed licenses until 2023, State Cannabis Board Chair decides in New York. Now again, this is not bad for the current MSOs that already have a moat there and will continue to be able to sell through New York. This sucks for the entrepreneurs or the veterans or the minority-owned business owners that can't even join the industry because of the lack of government progress. The head of State's Cannabis Board said Wednesday during a stop in Rochester that she anticipates licenses for the first recreational cannabis dispensaries in the state not being issued until spring of 2023 at the earliest. Tremaine Wright, the board chair, made the statement during a cannabis symposium held at Comedy at the Carlson. She said the board was working on an 18-month timeline to build the requisite policies framing the new legal cannabis market. That just seems ridiculous to me. What do you think? Let me know in the comments, because it just seems like they're trying to drag this out. The timeline, she said, doesn't necessarily mean dispensaries will be open or fully stocked by then either. What? That rather they will have the legal authority to operate. What we do control is getting dispensaries licensing and giving them all the tools so they can work within our systems, Wright said. That's what we are saying will be achieved in 18 months. Not that they're open, not that they'll be full-blown operations, because we don't know that. Her remarks were met with audible groans from the crowd, mainly made up of fledgling cannabis entrepreneurs and long-standing growers and dealers in the illicit market, being told that they are screwed, sadly. Now, I do hope that this changes, but this is just in line with, again, the government's inability to do anything, which fundamentally just helps corporations prosper. And in this scenario, it's the Tier 1 MSOs already in New York. On to some snippets from Todd Harrison. Be greedy when others are fearful. This is from Stifel, the investment firm, so I just wanted to share this. U.S. cannabis share prices have retreated to November 2020 election levels, while the cost of debt continues to decrease. Given credit trends are typically leading indicators, in our view it seems equity markets have dislocated from robust fundamentals, providing value investors with a long time horizon and ideal environment. Looking forward, we believe the new rec markets could unlock multi-year upside, representing a similar addressable opportunity at maturity as 2020 total industry sales. This is in the backdrop of limited visibility in federal reform, which currently drives share prices. We believe lawmakers are making multiple shots on goal, with SAFE having a 60% chance to pass in the defense bill NDAA. So that's the first we're hearing about that, but again, this is still just speculation, so we're just going to have to wait until the end of November and see what happens. Significantly lower probability for federal reform before 2020 midterms should this fail. Ultimately, we see large MSOs continuing to expand their moat as they leverage preferential access to capital to drive attractive organic growth and accretive M&A opportunities. Introducing 2023 forecasts of $31 billion in industry sales, a 20% compounded annual growth rate from 2020 with multi-year rec upside. We continue to focus on California, Florida, Illinois, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Ohio, Oklahoma, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, New Jersey, and New York for our state market forecast, and call our $31 billion in industry sales representing a 20% compounded annual growth rate and a more impressive 30% 5-year compounded annual growth rate from 2018. In addition, we raised our 2021 forecast by 7% to reflect the strong growth seen in first half of 2021, while keeping our 2022 estimates nearly unchanged as we continue with our conservative stance of decelerating growth and rising competition. However, we note considerable upside remains over a multi-year period, with New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Virginia, and New Mexico rec sales not being included in our forecast. Combined, these markets could generate a potential 15 to 20 billion of industry sales at maturity, representing a 50 to 65% upside over our 23 earnings or estimate forecast. In addition, we roll forward our valuation to 2023 while maintaining our bullish stance. So that's what they see. What do you see? Let me know in the comments, because ultimately the best thing we can do is plan accordingly. Well, we've got another great visual here from Todd Harrison on U.S. cannabis, and this is if we zoom out what we've seen over the last few years. And I mean, obviously, as a new investor, I could have played this better in the spring, but no one thought that the Dems would actually flip the Senate. And I covered that and thought that, wow, this is actually wild. They could act soon. Clearly, they didn't, and this was a sell the news event, and I've learned the lesson. But as a 28-year-old new investor, I'd rather make mistakes and learn now than, make them in the future when I'm dealing with more capital, because I see myself having 50, 60, 70 years of investing ahead of me. So ultimately, all we can say with this chart is that down here, MSOs were making half of the revenue that they're making, and they were not profitable. But now MSOs are cheaper than they've been since COVID lows, and they are more fundamentally healthier, opening more dispensaries, nearly doubling their revenue, and profitable at this point. So this is why come December, I will start looking for work again so I can start making income, because if we don't get safe in the NDAA and start to rally again come November, then all I want to do is make more money so that I can add to my positions come January when I can start recontributing to my TFSA. And so that's my plan. This is not advice. I'm just sharing what I can do, because clearly we can see, big picture, but what's more important is that these companies are very, very healthy, these MSOs. And I've shared that over time, and I will share their earnings next week, which will hopefully, reiterate that and show that. Well, we've got another great visual here from PV of free cash flow. So thank you, Graham, for sharing this. And he considers himself a value investor. So if you're looking for value in this overvalued market, look no further. As Veridian highlights, the bottom line is that if we believe the consensus analyst estimates, US MSOs look like incredible bargains. So let's share this from Veridian, looking at industry growth adjusted EBITDA multiples. Are US MSOs multiples too low? Now, I'm doing my best to decipher this, but I'm self-taught, so if I say anything that's wrong or you can correct me, please let me know in the comments. But if we take a look, the green bar represents the enterprise value, so not the market cap of the company, but their book value, divided by 2023 earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization estimates, divided by compounded annual growth rate in terms of revenue. So if we look, US MSOs are clearly the lowest in terms of growth adjusted EBITDA multiples, and we see many industries here with high multiples, which would give us reason to believe that there's a lot more growth baked into their prices already, whereas MSOs do not have any of that growth whatsoever. especially none of the total addressable market change that will be coming. Then if we look at the blue line, enterprise value divided by 2023 EBITDA, I think this relates to which companies are the cheapest out of them all. And if we can see, MSOs are still the cheapest if we look at their enterprise value divided by what they're anticipating for earnings in 2023. They're still the lowest out of them all. And then lastly, if we look at compounded annual growth rate in terms of revenue that these companies or that these industries are expecting 2021 to 2023, look who sets the bar at the highest possible rate. Then we've got hotel and gaming. Then we've got Canadian LPs. Then recreation, retail, all of these drugs, pharmaceutical at the lowest. See, they're not going to be making a lot of money. So these vaccines seem to have been a last-ditch effort for them. And MSOs are going to be making all the money into 2022 and 23. So just wanted to share that. That's a very interesting graphic. And then this is another one that I've shared before, but MJ Stock Trader is at it again. And, the more the prices fall just means the more upside that we will see in the future. So how ridiculously cheap are MSOs right now? The bottom two rows show the stock returns if each MSO gets to Celsius's, a wellness drink company's, price to sales of 29 or even half of it. As you can see, Celsius isn't even in the same league as these MSOs, just on a better exchange. Now, before I share with you, though, he says, note, I screwed up the Trulieve part. I added the harvest market cap and not the earnings. So Trulieve's not going to be accurate, so we're just not going to look at that here. Main thing, I'm just going to highlight that if we wanted to compare MSOs, if we put these MSOs on major U.S. exchanges so that they could trade at the same price to sales of Celsius, right now we would see MSOs, we'd see Curaleaf increase their share price by 447% right now if they went to a price to sales of what Celsius had, which was 29. Okay. Then if they didn't have a price to sales of 29, if they had 14.5, they'd still increase by 173%. We look at Green Thumb, 437%. If the price to sales was reflective of 29, similar to Celsius, 169%. Now we're not going to look at Trulieve because of what he mentioned, but Cresco, if the price to sales of 29, similar to Celsius, 643% increase. If their price to sales was a 14.5, 272% increase. While Verano would see 590% increase if given the same price to sales as Celsius, 245% increase if just half the price to sales of Celsius, while Columbia Care lastly would see the most impressive gains from these current valuations, 1,108% if given the same price to sales, or 504% if given just half the price to sales. So the potential for growth is massive here, folks, and if you're looking for value, I've put my money where my mouth is. This is not advice, and I'm not telling what you to do, but hopefully you can see what I and many of these other MSOs investors can see as well. On to some news from MSOs, as launch of Curaleaf International driven by liberalization of cannabis accelerating across Europe. So we're going to find out a little bit more about the European market. Now, I do still think it's very early to consider getting in there, and from at this point, it seems your best options are Curaleaf and Tilray, so those are two companies that you can look into if you want that exposure, but let's find out. So Curaleaf International's cannabis flower products and extracted cannabis-based products now supply 5 separate markets, including Germany, Europe's largest market for medicinal cannabis, which is expected to be worth over $840 million by 2025. In the UK, specifically over the last 12 months, the number of patients using the company's products have increased 5-fold. Building on the momentum within European medical cannabis markets, Curaleaf International expects to see significant regulatory change across Europe for adult use recreational cannabis over the coming years, with expectations that the total European cannabis market will be worth $3.2 billion by 2025. Now, that's a big claim. We're just going to have to watch and wait and see if that plays out. Curaleaf International expects the trends to follow that of Canada and the US, which both started with the legalization of medicinal cannabis before moving to legalize cannabis for adult use. With a population of approximately 740 million people, Europe presents a greater market size than that of North America. The potential commercial impact of cannabis legalization in Europe is significant. 1 in 10 Europeans use cannabis every year, while a quarter of people admit to having used cannabis at least once in their lifetime. The annual sales in illicit market cannabis are estimated around $11 billion. As highlighted in the European Cannabis Report, 6th edition, it is projected that sales of adult use cannabis will reach $200 million by 2023, coming close to $800 million in 2025. Taking into account growth in the recreational sector due to decreasing stigma and ease of access, Prohibition partners increased their total market estimate from $800 million to $3.2 billion by 2025. Now, that's a big increase if the action that follows isn't justified. So just keep that in mind. The company expects that over the next 3 to 4 years, significant regulatory changes will occur across the continent, with recent progress has notably occurred in Switzerland, the Netherlands, Italy, and Germany. But again, this is talk of progress. Very little actual progress has been implemented. So keep that in mind, but this is interesting as the projected European growth. This is a visual if you wanted to take a look at it. Obviously very small now, but anticipated to grow and increase in 2024 and 2025. So I will also be looking to take some of my profits from the next few years and move them into this if possible, but that's something I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. On to Columbia Care, completes acquisition of Colorado-based Medicine Man, strengthening their leadership position in the world's second largest cannabis market. So let's find a little bit more about this. The Columbia Care announced it has completed its acquisition of Medicine Man, a premier vertically integrated Colorado-based cannabis company that has been serving the Denver metro since 2009. Total upfront consideration was $42 million, comprised of $8.4 million in cash and $33.6 million in stock, with the potential for an additional milestone payment based on 2021 performance. The transaction is immediately accretive to adjusted EBITDA and cash flow from operations. Upfront consideration of $42 million represents a multiple of approximately 45x projected 2021 EBITDA numbers. And this acquisition adds 1 cultivation facility and 4 dispensaries to Columbia Care's Colorado operations, including the Medicine Man Longmont location, which is anticipated to close in Q1 2022. Columbia Care's footprint in Colorado will now total 26 dispensaries and 6 cultivation and manufacturing facilities, including those under the Green Solution brand. So good job, Columbia Care, as they keep expanding. Well, we've got some news from marijuana moment. Key House committee will vote on cannabis research bill for veterans this week. So this is a nice update, as a congressional committee is scheduled to vote on a bill on Thursday that would require the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to conduct clinical trials into the therapeutic potential of cannabis for military veterans, like this should have been done in the 80s after Vietnam. While marijuana legalization is not associated with increased mental illness or suicide, new study finds, despite opposition claims. So this is very positive, as legalizing cannabis is not associated with an increased risk of mental illness or suicide, despite what some opponents of the policy change have argued, according to a new study. In fact, the study found that legalizing cannabis is associated with a 6.29% decrease in suicide among males and 40 to 49. This is huge. Why is this not in the news and being talked about? The fact that it reduces suicide on top of all the other positive things that cannabis can do. Regardless, the relationship between cannabis and mental health has been a topic of significant interest for both proponents and opponents of cannabis reform, and we really can't even dive in until we deschedule the damn plant, so it'd be great if we can start on that. But advocates have pointed to studies showing that cannabis appears to be effective treatment for certain symptoms and conditions of post-traumatic stress disorder, for example. On the other side, prohibitionists have maintained that cannabis leads to severe mental illness and an increased risk of suicidality, which is, again, just false, and with more data we're proving that, which is great. But so researchers at the Case West Reserve University School of Medicine, Yale Law School, Cato Institute, and Reason Foundation decided to investigate the issue, looking to see if the conclusions of an earlier 2013 study has changed. And so they basically took that study, followed the methodology, and from that study, for an update, performed a state-level longitudinal analysis using suicide rates from the National Center of Health Statistics and mental health morbidity rates from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health. And along with finding that recreational cannabis access was associated with a 6.29% reduction in suicide rates for males aged 40 to 49, no other mental health outcomes were otherwise affected by liberalization of medical cannabis laws. Take that, prohibitionists. On to this one, as legalizing cannabis reduces race-based arrests as well, American Medical Association study finds. States that legalize or decriminalize cannabis see large reductions in race-based arrests among adults, while those that maintain prohibition continue to experience increases in arrest rate disparities. A new study in major scientific journal published by the American Medical Association found, which is absolutely insane. This research looked at data from 43 states and identified a clear pattern. It might seem obvious on its face, but ending or loosening laws criminalizing cannabis is associated with significant arrest decreases compared to states that have maintained prohibition. It is obvious if you think clearly and aren't motivated by fear. So anyways, the analysis of arrests, which specifically focus on trends related to race, compared data from 2018 to 2019. The researchers from East Virginia Medical School and St. Louis University found that states that legalized cannabis saw 561 fewer arrests per 100,000 black people and 195 fewer arrests for white people on average over that time period. Well, decriminalization was associated with roughly 449 fewer arrests per 100,000 black people and a drop of 117 for white people. So, in contrast, cannabis arrests for adults and youth increased over time in states that did not implement a cannabis policy change. The study, published by the Journal of the American Medical Association Health Forum last week, concluded, and beyond raw arrest rates, racial disparities in arrests also increased in states that maintain prohibition while dropping in states that enacted reform. So it's just like states that live in ignorance, states that choose not to. That seems to be where we're at, and it's very sad, but thankfully, more states are reforming their laws. While Army recruits who've used cannabis perform no worse than other soldiers, military-funded reports finds. Findings from new government-funded analysis of U.S. Army recruits suggest that past cannabis use has relatively little impact on overall performance. Yeah, obviously, recruits with documented histories of cannabis use were just as likely as their peers to make sergeant, for example, and while they were more likely to leave the army over drug use, they were less likely to separate as a result of health or performance concerns. Further, there's no strong evidence that the continuing trend of legalization across the country has significantly affected recruit outcomes. And contrary to expectations, wavered recruits and recruits with a documented history of cannabis or behavioral health conditions are not uniformly riskier across all dimensions, says the analysis from the RAND Corporation, and in some cases, they are historically more likely to perform better. The nearly 2,000-page report centers on waivers which allow the Army to reconsider applicants who were initially disqualified for various reasons. Among those reasons is cannabis use, so hopefully this new data can show the U.S. Army that they were wrong in the past, and if recruits with a history of cannabis were just as likely as other recruits to complete their first term and make sergeant, and they were less likely to leave the Army for health or performance reasons, it might give them more of an incentive to change their ridiculous double standard towards this plant. Well, this one comes from Forbes. I just wanted to highlight it because it's looking at the same study I reported on a while back and similar to what the Wall Street Journal reported, but this is an accurate objective headline from Forbes, so thank you, Forbes. Study finds medical cannabis may help treat depression and anxiety to improve sleep. While the Wall Street Journal reported people are using cannabis to treat their depression and anxiety, but the science is murky. Well, you could actually report accurately and include the science in your article, or you can do what the Wall Street Journal is doing. So don't be the Wall Street Journal. Thank you, Forbes, for good reporting. On to this one from Benzinga. As cannabis users integrate weed into their routines, jobs, and lives, as MJ producers like the sound of this. A study undertaken by the San Francisco, and I just gotta say, well, because it's medicine, it always has been. So no wonder, but I digress. A study undertaken by San Francisco-based cannabis delivery platform Eaze found an increasing crossover between cannabis use and off-the-couch activities, including work, fitness, and intimacy, reported Adweek. It sounds counterintuitive, but cannabis for responsible adults does exist. We're seeing the integration of cannabis into parts of life where we previously didn't see it. It's not about waking up and hitting a bong, Ashford told Adweek. Some people may take a 2 milligram sativa edible like someone else would drink an espresso in the morning. The study, which included 1,100 Eaze customers, found the following. 43% of users polls said they microdose cannabis prior to clocking in at their jobs. 40% have full-time employment. 36 reported that productive is their favorite kind of high. 22 use cannabis for stress and mental health. 17 cited fun as their primary motivation to use cannabis, and 12% said better sleep was their main goal. The survey also asked about the role cannabis played in many other aspects of people's lives, including careers and intimate relationships. These were the results. 40% paired cannabis with a new skill or hobby in the past year. 64% ranked art and music as the top two activities that integrate with cannabis. 37% paired cooking with cannabis, and 79% of Eaze customers reported using cannabis before sex. Finally, 37% said they pair cannabis with their workouts, countering the erroneous and outdated image of couch lock stoner. So I love me this new data because it shows the prohibitionists have been wrong all along. And on to this one, Weed Street 420, JP Morgan cites U.S. anti-money laundering compliance framework as reason for new cannabis stocks policy. And so this is a good tweet from Jeff Schultz. I wanted to share how I read this because they're saying anti-money laundering compliance framework is why they have to implement this new policy. Not necessarily because they're against cannabis or anything, but ultimately I didn't react to this news from JP Morgan because it's them basically saying, we feel the same way today that we felt yesterday, and we're going to act the same way that we felt yesterday and today tomorrow. So it wasn't a big deal, but I appreciate investors who've been in the space longer than me so I can learn from them and hear their perspective. As Jeff Schultz shares how I read this, we're asking for updated, clear FinCEN guidance and an updated Cole memo once safe banking passes, and we need to ask with clean hands. And he adds, Bank of America, now JP Morgan, now taking a hardline stance on cannabis. I'm old enough to remember when several banks did this in early September 2019, right before SAFE hit the floor. Clean hands doctrine. Now, I was invested in cannabis, but I wasn't as aware and paying attention to it as I am now. So interesting that this is coming, and it seems like for those investors in U.S. cannabis with past experience, they see a bit of a trend and a pattern. So this is why it seems many of them do think that SAFE is going to stay in the NDAA. And ultimately, we're just going to have to wait for November to find out. And lastly, I want to end on some humor. So thank you, Jason Spatafor, Wolf of Weed Street, for sharing this because it's so true. And this is why it's important to just consider your own plan and not, succumb to what anyone else is saying. A long-term strategy is like a condom. Better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. Very accurate.
Yes, 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 yes. No, 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 shit.
That's so good. And with that in mind, folks, just keep in mind, all of these factors are still at play and nothing has changed. That's what's really worth remembering. And, while I haven't been able to reinvest and average down, it doesn't bother me because I know I'm invested. And that's why come December, I will start looking for income if SAFE doesn't end up staying in the NDAA. But thankfully, I have a month to not worry about it and we can wait and see what happens. But keep in mind, MSO earnings will start next week with the big MSOs Curaleaf starting the trend. And I will be reporting all of that to you as I have in the past. And I do enjoy or anticipate these numbers as I think they will be strong, probably better than the analysts were anticipating too, because we've seen some strong growth out of states. And so we're just going to keep chugging along and preparing as best as we can for when that flip switches. And that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or concerns, and I'd be happy to address them. Besides that, if you enjoyed this or you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Friday. And I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great day, everybody.